Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another one of our TEPSA Presents. I'm Todd Neslony, the Director of Culture and Strategic Leadership here at the Texas Elementary Principals and Supervisors Association. We are thrilled twice a month to bring you different episodes of timely topics that will help you grow and get better in your field. I am so excited today to be talking about avoiding burnout with my friend and guest today, Tyler Mallet. Tyler, thanks for being here. Tell everybody kind of who you are.
Sure. Well, my name is Tyler, and I am a coach, and I'm an educational consultant, and I specialize in stress. And so you will not hear me talking much about instruction or behavior or curriculum. My entire focus is on helping educators to find more well-being and reduce their stress. And so I am a former teacher. I'm a former district director of instructional technology. I have traveled all over the country working as a consultant for a major publisher. And so I have walked through hundreds of schools all over the country and have really seen how stress is really affecting our impact as educators. And so a couple of years ago, I became a professional coach. And so that's what I do full time now.
Awesome. Well, a couple weeks ago, we had our last TEPSA Present with Daniel Patterson, where we talked about some ways to help teams and you as an administrator or a teacher or a leader of any kind of avoid some stress and reduce some of that stress. And so we thought that went off so well that I knew you specialized in this. And I know that I'm talking to educators and administrators from across the United States right now, and burnout is on the tip of everyone's tongue. The constant thing that I'm hearing is it feels like it's April and it's only September. Sure. And I'm exhausted, I'm wiped out. Just that whole idea of not having answers to so many things makes things even more difficult. And then teaching virtual and in person. I mean, there's a laundry list of things. But, we're going to go through several different kind of buckets or things in here today. And so the first thing I want to talk about, though, is, let's talk about burnout and define it and get it out there. And, what are some symptoms or some signs that we should be aware of to know that we're getting near that burnout stage, not just that tired stage, but that burnout stage?
Yeah, so let's get into the symptoms. And but before we do that, I do want to define what burnout means. I'm sure that you've heard lately a lot of people, it seems like everybody is using the word teacher tired, which, as you said, Todd, we usually use that in the spring, so it's a little bit concerning. And teacher tired, we might as well also call that admin tired. It's all the same. But teacher tired is a little bit different. I think that teacher tired is a normal thing. It usually will last a few weeks, typically around back to school, right? Until you get the hang of things, you kind of have that feeling of just being tired all the time. So you're working long hours, you're getting home after dark, and maybe you just want to crawl in bed at 8 p.m. And that's okay, right? Because when you're teacher tired, you're still pushing through that tiredness, and you still generally like the job that you do, right? You love your students, you have great friendships with your colleagues, and you just happen to be a tired person who still likes their job. Now, burnout, much different story, okay? And so I think burnout is defined as being like more of a prolonged process that has no end in sight. So it's where the demands that are required of you are always bigger than the resources that you have available, right? So it's like, right. I have too much to do. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough people on my team. Maybe I don't have sufficient resources. It's like this all day, every day with no escape. And what you're doing with burnout, or when you're getting close to burnout, is you're pushing your body so hard that your body eventually says, okay, you're not going to give me a break. And so I've got no other choice but to just run out of gas.
Right.
And so a couple of symptoms. The first one is no motivation. So you literally lose your willpower. And someone who's experiencing burnout will start to notice that they'll just sit at their desk and stare at their work and literally cannot get started. Mm-hmm. You may walk into a meeting and you are unable to track what the speakers are even saying because you just have no ability to focus. So I would say no motivation. Right. Another symptom would be feeling like shame or guilt. And this one's interesting because that shame and guilt has nothing to do with work. The reason you would feel shame and guilt is because of all the stuff in your personal life that you've been neglecting, right? Because something's got to give. And so think about your spouse, your children, even your pets that are not being tended to because school is taking up all your time. Your personal space maybe is a wreck. So you've got laundry and dishes that are piling up for days. Things like your diet or your fitness is off track. And maybe even in severe cases, burnout can feel like you can feel shame because you're not even taking care of your own personal hygiene. Okay. So I would say guilt and shame. And then another symptom would be, and this is like when you get to the extreme cases, would be resentment toward your own work. And that's when it gets really bad, right? Because the job is the thing that's been taking all of your time. And so you start to become sort of cynical, or for some people, it's like irritability or being angry at your coworkers. You sort of have like no more pride in your work, and you really don't care about your job anymore. And it's at that point where I think we should be concerned.
Well, and hearing you talk about that, I can so associate with that, with the conversations I've been hearing, because, from so many people, they've loved teaching. They've loved being an administrator. They've loved working with the kids, but it's reached that point, just like you said, where right now it's that feeling of I'm just so to my limit. And so when we talk about burnout and we talk about how it affects people, I'm sure everybody is feeling some form of burnout this year, but does it affect certain people more than others? Like, what types of people are more likely to be affected by burnout?
Well, I would say perfectionists. That would be a type of person. I see you laughing there. It's funny because education is full of them, right? I'll raise my hand right now. I think there are a lot of perfectionists in education who are having trouble right now adapting. So let's talk about like what is a perfectionist? A perfectionist is somebody who they get their sense of worth or their sense of value in the world. It's contingent upon the work that they do. They want to do everything at 100% so that they can feel valuable. And so even the smallest tasks, like something like sending an email, right? The perfectionist is going to write the email, and then they will edit the email, and then they'll double check the attachment, and then they delete the whole thing and they start over because they want to sound more polite, right? And the next thing you know, that 1 minute task has taken them 5 or 10 minutes, right? So imagine a perfectionist administrator, a perfectionist principal. Now we're being asked to do things like write a large complex document related to back to school COVID-19, right? And so the list just gets longer and longer. And I think in 2020, because our tasks are so unfamiliar, we've got to watch out for our perfectionist friends because they are very prone to burnout. Another one would be an empath. And so empathy is a good thing. Empathy is a quality, I think, that in leaders we should always be leading with empathy, especially right now, because we have to have the ability to understand other people's feelings. But an empath is a person who really struggles to kind of draw the line, like they can't turn that off. They have this heightened sense of not only do they understand other people's feelings, but they take them on as their own feelings. Right. So again, back to our example, let's say you have a principal or an administrator who's an empath. Think about, Todd, on your team, how many different people you serve, all of the different teachers, all of the parents, all of the students, and everybody's going through something right now. Yeah. And so the empath is taking all of that stress, not only their own stress, but everybody else's stress. I've got someone on my team, let's say, who maybe has a health condition that unfortunately is making them vulnerable. And so I'm taking on that worry. I've got somebody else who maybe has a financial difficulty due to the economy. And so I'm taking on that worry. And so the empath, it's like they can't filter out other people's problems. And so they are very prone to burnout right now.
I can really associate with that one right there, because I think often about, when I was in the classroom still, there were so many times where I struggled with disconnecting with the issues from my team that they were dealing with in their personal lives, or my students and their families. And now when all those issues are compounded with the loss of jobs and the stress of a pandemic and all this online learning, I can see that like exactly what you said about that being really hard on empaths. But then I'm looking at thinking, goodness, those perfectionists, empathetic people, they've got a double whammy. And so
Yeah.
I hear you talking about this, and it all sounds great. And I get what burnout is, but here's the deal. I'm an administrator and I'm stuck right smack in the middle of chaos. How do I break this cycle? How do I, where do I even begin? What's the first step? Because when you're reaching that burnout stage, it's like, I'm so exhausted and so overwhelmed. I don't even know where to start with breaking the cycle.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So I like that you're asking about the first step, because you're absolutely right. We are so in the middle of it that we just need to know what to do first. And so I'll say this. We all have the same amount of time in our week, right? And so if you subtract like sleeping and your personal obligations and the time you spend at work, even if you're working 60 hours a week, there is still lots of time that you have control over, hours and hours in a week. The problem that I see is that I think as educators, we are not spending those hours intentionally recharging ourselves. And here's why. I think that we have this story in our heads, don't we? Like, educators are selfless and we're giving, and we should be available for all people at all times. And so it almost becomes, it's a story in our head, but it almost becomes like a victim mindset or a scarcity mindset. Like, there's just not enough time. And I think when we practice a story over and over, it becomes a belief. Right. So that's kind of a long way around to your question. What is the first step? The first step is you've got to write a new story. Okay. Now that's tricky because, as you said, I'm in the middle of it. So how would you focus on staying dry if you're standing in the middle of a rainstorm without an umbrella?
Right.
You can't focus on preventing burnout when you're in the middle of the chaos. And so here's the first step. You have to create some temporary distance between you and the work. And I want, if someone watching this is experiencing burnout right now, you got to do this soon. And so you literally have to block out a couple of hours, or take a mental health day if you have to. And you want to do an exercise where you rewrite your vision, not for your school, for you, for your life this school year. So take an afternoon or take a weekend, and you want to bring your notebook, okay? And you want to go someplace where it would be literally impossible for you to work. So go walk out somewhere in nature, go sit by a lake, go to your favorite coffee shop and turn off your Wi-Fi and put your phone on Do Not Disturb, okay? And so what you want to do with this exercise is, I recommend bucketing out your life. And so take that notebook, or take some sticky notes if you have to, and think about what are all the categories in your life as a whole that you might be missing right now. Okay, so I'll give you some examples. So one of them could be relationships. How do I want my family life to look this school year? How do I want my marriage or my friendships to look this school year? Okay, so that would be under the relationships bucket. And then you find a different bucket. What else is important to me? Well, what about health and fitness? What are my fitness goals this year to have the ideal body? What would make me feel confident? What are my personal goals? So something like, maybe I'm finishing my master's or my doctorate, or I'm starting a little side business, or I'm writing a book. Okay. And so you just keep going down the list, and you just think about what are the different categories in your life. So hobbies, we surely forget about our hobbies right now, right? So gardening, hiking, biking, cooking, baking, what would be some hobbies that would bring me joy if I made time for them? Maybe service or volunteering, right? Travel. There's no rules about what these buckets are, but you just want to think about the categories. Now, here's why that activity is powerful. It's forcing you, because you created some distance, right? It's forcing you to zoom out and try to see the big picture of your life. And so what that's going to do is it'll give you that distance, and it gives you like a compelling vision for the school year. And it'll help you to see that your life is like a pie. And right now it probably feels to you like, what, 90% of the pie is being filled by the chaos at work. And this activity will let you sort of see all the different slices in your pie, and it'll motivate you to start filling in those slices better.
You know, I think one of the things that you said there that really stuck out to me, that I remember being in a training and a similar conversation like this came up. And what was said was, you know, don't schedule an hour in your workday to do this. This is work that you need to take and get away from your traditional spaces, where you need to go, like you said, go sit by a lake, go down a trail, go sit at a coffee shop with the Wi-Fi turned off. Like, put yourself in a different environment so that you are disconnected from that for whatever time that you need to, like you said, create those buckets and see, where do I need to put my time? Because, you know, as administrators and as educators, we always are, well, there's too much on the list right now. If I take that afternoon off, I'm going to have 15 more things to do. And what took me forever to get to the point to understand was that list will always be there. It doesn't matter how much headway I make into that, it will still be there. That's what our jobs are. And so we can't use that there's just going to be more piled up if I take the afternoon off, because what'll happen is that more will pile up and you're not protecting your mental health. And so now you've got a double whammy where you can't even focus or concentrate. And so I love that you said just getting away and taking that time. And, you know, I've heard this phrase over-explaining before. And so sometimes, you know, I hear that we make our stress worse by always talking about it and over-explaining what our stress is. Talk to me more about what that is.
Yeah, you've heard me say it, right, Todd? Because I am a anti-explainer. Let's call it that. And so you're absolutely right. So venting is kind of what we're all doing right now, and there's nothing wrong with venting. I think venting can be a really good way that you can, you know, relieve stress, right? Because venting helps you to validate your feelings. And let's face it, there's a lot of stuff that we can vent about right now, because the things that are going on in terms of the problems in schools, they're new and they're novel. They've never happened before. And so they can be interesting to talk about, almost entertaining to talk about. And so what I think a lot of us are doing right now is we're soothing our stress by living it for 8 hours at work. And then we go home, and what do? We explain our stress for the rest of the night. So you're in your group texts with your coworkers, and you're sending them links to articles about your district, and you're sending them gossip about what happened that day, right? And then someone from your family calls and says, oh, how was your week? And you rehash the whole story of what happened at work. And so you are not only living the stress for 8 hours, but you're basically doubling it, because every time you talk about your stress, you're just keeping it active in your mind. And so that's kind of my concept of over-explaining. And so I'm a big believer in really watching your language, because the more that you use this kind of victim language, and let's face it, we are all under an extreme amount of stress. But when you use this language that I'm just sort of stuck in it, and you're not talking about the solutions, then you'll stay stuck in it. And a lot of times I think it makes it worse.
So are you telling people not to vent?
So that's a good question. So here's where venting works. Venting is really good for a sad or depressed kind of mood. Okay, so let's say that you had something tragic that happened in your life, or something shocking that happened in your life, especially like the loss of a loved one. Venting is perfect for that, because you have emotions that you need to process, right? But when it comes to stress, I think you can vent for 5 or 10 minutes. But what a lot of us are doing wrong is that we're just talking about it over and over and over again. You see over-explainers if you log into social media and you look at the comments, right? These are the people who just can't stay out of the comments. And so I think a better solution, I call it the art of distraction, is to set a time at the end of the night, 6 p.m., 7 p.m., whatever it is, where you focus your conversations on other things that actually bring you joy in life. Maybe something that you're really interested in learning about that's not related to work, or, you know, talking with your loved ones about what happened that day. and then politely let yourself out of some of those group texts where all they're doing is talking about work problems.
I think what you really said there that really stuck with me is that there is a good way to vent and a bad way. Because I think people hear the word venting and they're like, no, venting's always good. Like, we got to get it off our chest. But I think, like you said, like when you're venting in those sad moments, that is good. You do need to get that out. But like you said, when you're venting just to complain, there's not a solution involved and you're just rehashing. And, the stresses of the day, we're now bringing into our evenings and our families and our weekends, and we think that it's going to help us deal with it more. And really, it's just keeping that emotion at the forefront, and we're just upset, overwhelmed by those emotions. And so, Tyler, people may be listening today and they may be thinking, okay, these are great starting points. I'll go take an afternoon off. I'll go spend some time on the weekend. I'll save a couple hours here, whatever, and I'll start making that list and seeing where I can do my time. I'll make sure that I'm setting these standards when I'm venting, and I'll make sure that I'm looking for solutions. Like, that's great, Tyler, but my burnout's kind of at an extreme level. Like, I feel like I need some resources besides just this conversation we have had today. Where are some great resources or places people can go to make sure that they don't burn out and then leave the profession?
Yeah, I think the best resource is to have someone that you can work through this with, not someone that you can vent with, right? So there's kind of three types of people you can look for. The first, and this is for the most extreme case, if you're feeling like this is like a medical emergency and there's nothing wrong, if it is, then I would say consult a therapist. Call and make an appointment. Most of us who have, we have insurance through the school system. And so you can get in quickly and talk to them for an hour, just kind of dump it all out of your brain about what's going on. Okay, that's if it feels like you are feeling like it's an emergency. Another person that you can reach out to would be a coach. That's what I do. And so thinking about if you're a leader, especially if you're in central office, an executive coach and someone who's used to working with leaders. If you are a teacher, reach out to a life coach. Okay, and so that's what I'm both of those, and I specialize in teachers. And so the reason why a coach is helpful is because a coach, again, is not going to just let you stay stuck. They're going to challenge your limiting beliefs. They're going to work with you on figuring out what your options are. And then they're going to hold you accountable for an action plan. So maybe you are someone who's trying to balance family life with school, or you're trying to get your doctorate and balance that with school, or you're trying to get in shape and balance your fitness with school. A coach is a perfect person who can hold you accountable for those changes. And then the third would be a mentor. So where is that other principal, or even somebody higher up, maybe even a superintendent who you really look up to and you want to be like someday, reaching out to them and literally saying, hey, I admire your work and I would really like for you to be a mentor for me. And this is a person that you can, schedule calls with, maybe once a month, have virtual coffee or something, and they can also support you through your stress.
And what I would say too, for everybody here at TEPSA, if you're watching today and you're an administrator or an educator and you don't even know where to begin with a mentor or somebody you can connect with, or you're in a small district or you're in a large district and you don't know anybody, like, reach out to TEPSA. Email us. You can email me, anybody else. I'm todd@tepsa.org. You can call our number. We'll connect you with other members, or we'll help you along the route. That's the great thing about being involved with an association, is you already have a network that you can begin to have those connections and relationships with. And during these pandemic times, you and I both know, Tyler, that the relationships are even more important so we don't get overwhelmed with not being able to be as socially in-person interactive as we have. Well, Tyler, this has been a great conversation today about avoiding burnout. I know that we put in the comments, people can go to tylermallet.com to get some more resources and ideas as well, of ways that they can continue this growth and learning. So thank you, Tyler, for being here. From everybody at TEPSA, we really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Todd.
And thank you, everybody, for joining another episode of TEPSA Presents. Goodness, TEPSA Presents. You can join us every 2 weeks for a new episode. And our next one coming up is going to be all about virtual fundraisers. So make sure to check that out.